Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and still making Christmas cards right up until the day of. The ideas are still flowing. It's as usual trying to find the time. So for today's card, I'm using the Fawn Winter Unicorn mini stamp set, and I stamped the unicorn onto a scrap of neenah Solar White 110 pound cardstock with Copic friendly ink, which today was Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. Then I've sped up this portion quite a bit. This is just Copic coloring, really simple. I didn't use very many markers for blending or anything like that. I will have the colors listed on my blog as always. I just kept the coloring really simple and decided to do two of them because they're a small image and it's simple coloring. So I can use one on the outside of the card and add a second to the inside because it wasn't a whole lot of extra time to color a second one. So I did Y32 for a bit of the unicorn and a bit of the unicorn's horn, and then C2 for a little bit of the shading, and then I used some pinks and greens and blues for the mane and tail, and the colors were inspired by the pattern paper I'm going to use on my card. So once I was done with all of my coloring, I'm going to run these through my Big Shot with the little coordinating die that you can get for this set. So lined up the die on my magnetic platform and cutting plate, and then ran that through my machine, die cut the second little unicorn, and then since I had my machine out, I did all my die cutting at once. So I did that, and then I've got the My Favorite Things Stitched Circle Scalloped Frames Dynamics, say that 3 times fast, running that through with another piece of heavyweight white cardstock, and I'm using the largest die from that set, which is roughly almost 4¼ inches across. It's quite big. And I found a circle die that was just slightly smaller than the frame, just barely. And I ran some pattern paper through with that, as well as my transparency. And I always link to my transparencies in the description box. I got mine, I think I'd ordered them off Amazon, or I got them at an office supply store. I just linked to them on Amazon, but I got a box of like 100 of them. I'm not even kidding, like 10 years ago. And they last forever. So I just die cut the transparency, and then I decided I was going to stamp my sentiment onto the base of my shaker here because it's so large. There was plenty of space. So I treated the pattern paper with my anti-static powder tool first, and then I'm stamping the sentiments, which are from that same Winter Unicorn set with Versamark ink. And then I'm going to coat those with some detail white embossing powder. And once I've got that done, I'm going to let my heat tool heat up for a few seconds to make sure it's good and hot before I bring it to the paper so that there's less chance of me warping the pattern paper because it's thinner. And I'm going to melt that embossing powder. So once I've got my embossing powder melted, I'm going to start assembling my shaker elements here. So I thought I'd do some experimenting and use the new to me Xyron tape runner for the frame itself, because it's got all the little dots of adhesive. It's not a solid strip, so any of the areas that aren't the actual frame won't get adhesive. Side note, I would put scratch paper under when you're doing something like this so that the scratch paper can catch any little extra random dots of adhesive, because I did get some on my craft mat and I just had to rub them off with my hands. But now that I know. So that worked great though, and then I adhered my transparency to my frame. And then I got my big Scotch Big Mama roll of foam tape here, and I trimmed it into thirds because this frame is so narrow. So I trimmed it into thirds, and normally I would double up on my foam tape, but I only wanted to do a layer at a time, and you'll see why in a second. But I removed the backing tape or backing paper so you can see it makes it way easier to manipulate, and I can go right around this entire circle in one pass. I don't have to cut up a bunch of pieces, fiddle around with anything like that. I can just stick it on and go all the way around the circle. And if I had doubled it up, I would have been just done. But I wanted to attach my unicorn, and Jennifer McGuire had shown this in a video a couple months ago. And then I showed this thread in a haul video because I went and ordered it, of course, the minute I saw her video. This is nylon thread, and it is almost invisible. On video, it practically is invisible. Even in real life, it's kind of hard to see. It's so thin, and it's perfect. So I cut off a piece, and then I taped it to the back of the unicorn. And then I figured out where I wanted my unicorn to be in this shaker. And then I just pressed on the top and bottom pieces of thread right into the sticky foam tape there, so it will hold this in place. And I just made sure it was just loose enough so that the unicorn can shake around with everything else in the shaker, but is still controlled where I want it. So it's not flopping all over the inside of the shaker and getting stuck to the sides or anything like that. I love this. Perfect. This thread is a must-have, because if you want to do like, shaker elements like this or spinner cards or things like that, this thread's really cool. So once I was happy with where it was, this is where I added the second layer of foam tape, and that sandwiches in the top and bottom pieces of that thread so that it's not going to go anywhere. And if you really want things to shake, I would add a third layer of foam tape. I didn't, because I just, force of habit, I usually never add more than 2. I find 2 is adequate, but if you really want things to shake, I would add a third. So I also brushed my anti-static powder tool along just the inside of that foam tape, making sure not to get it on the main areas so that it loses its stickiness. But along the inside, I did that so that the sequins aren't going to stick heavily to the inside of the shaker. And then for all the shaker pieces, because it's so large, I went heavy-handed with all of the elements because I wanted a lot. And I basically created my own mix with some pretty pink posh. I used some Bermuda Blue, pink blush, and pink peonies, as well as some Martha Stewart Iridescent Hearts glitter. And then I added just a few micro beads as well, just some clear ones, just to give it that more shaker sound, which you'll hear in a minute. And once I had everything dumped in there, I decided to adhere a few directly to the base where I have the sentiment stamped, just so that they're not all just sitting on the bottom when the card's standing upright. Plus, I wanted to adhere a few of those little hearts around the words. So I'm just using my little crystal katana here to push them into place, and little tiny dabs of multimedia matte adhesive. So I adhered several of those around the inside of my shaker here. And then to adhere this all together, I had made things more difficult with myself by having the sentiment stamped on the inside. Otherwise, you could just stick it on. But I just made sure my shaker was basically upright, and then my sentiment was upright, so that when I adhere this, I didn't adhere that image I have hanging there over the sentiment, and it just worked, thankfully. So I've got my super fun little shaker element, and those beads just give it that little extra sound. So really, really fun. And the pattern paper, before I get to that, the thread, I was going to just cut it off, but instead I decided to fold it over the back of the shaker and tape it down just to give that little extra bit of security so it doesn't come off if someone's really vigorously shaking. So tape that down, and then I'm going to adhere all my pattern paper together, and these are all from the Doodlebug Kitten Smitten pack. I'm going to adhere them again with this Xyron tape runner. This is another thing, Xyron told me this after I had posted my little haul video about this, because people had said a few things in the comments. I had kind of assumed as much, but you do need to go slower with this adhesive. If you go too fast, the adhesive isn't going to adhere down to your paper, and then it's going to start gumming up the insides, and that's why people will have issues with it winding on itself and getting too loose. So if you use kind of a slower, steadier rate, so far I've had no problems with it. I'm really liking it. So got all my patterned paper adhered, and like I said, that was the Doodlebug Kitten Smitten, which, by the way, I have not yet done a cat themed card with that paper. I've made several cards with it, just none with cats. So, and totally not Christmas themed, but I just like the colors and I thought they were perfect for unicorns. So I'm adhering everything into my card base, which is a 5.5-inch square card. I was going to make just a smaller, simpler card, but I remembered I had this fabulous envelope in my stash from the Paper Garden, which again was in that same video that I did about the Xyron adhesive, so I'll have that linked at the end. So I decided to make a larger card. So I had a 5.5-inch by 11-inch piece of cardstock that I scored at 5.5. So this is a top folding 5.5-inch square card. So quite large. And got everything adhered, and then on the inside I had these leftover pieces of pattern paper from cutting the pieces for the outside. So I'm going to adhere those to the bottom of the inside of the card first. And then once I've got those adhered, I grabbed the last little bit of the sentiments from the set, because the outside says, "All I want for Christmas is you," and then in parentheses, "and a unicorn." So I inked that part up with some Memento Angel Pink ink, and then adhered my little unicorn, and that finished off this really fun, like totally non-traditional card. It was just so much fun. Gavin ended up coming in when I was done, and he thought this was the cutest thing ever. Shaking it around and hearing it, he thought it was cute, and then he kept trying to pull it apart to pull the unicorn out of the card. So anyway, once I was done, I pulled out the envelope that was in the back of my mind that inspired the reason why I made such a big card, and this is to write it down, Paper Garden 6-inch squared Star Dream Rose Quartz envelope. I think it deserves the title. Isn't it gorgeous? It doesn't necessarily match the shade of pink I used, and yet it's so pretty. So a card like this, I normally would probably hand deliver with the envelope because it's just beautiful. But if you were to mail it, this is what I would do. So I would get a piece of fun foam here, and I chose pink because it just made sense to me. I marked the size of the card. Fun foam, I can't cut with my paper trimmer. I just use the paper trimmer to basically give me guidelines. You could use a ruler and a pen and a ruler instead, but I like to make things difficult. So I trimmed it out to the size of the card, and then I grabbed a circle die that was about the same size as the shaker element completely, but not quite. And I didn't run this, even if it was a little bit bigger, I wouldn't have run it through my die cut machine. Other people have said like, oh, you run it through and then the foam like pops back up to its original size afterwards. Mine never does. I've said it before. That's why I don't use fun foam very often. That's why I don't die cut with it, because it squishes flat and it stays flat. I have problems. So anyway, I used scissors and a pencil, just trimmed out the circle from the center of the fun foam. And then I took a piece of chipboard, which just happens to be a cereal box, and trimmed that down again to the same size of the card because it's thick and it's sturdy. So trim that down so that it's going to cover the front of the card. And in this way, I can protect the shaker element if I want to pop it in the mail. So you could also stick the card just in the envelope and stick it inside a padded envelope because, you go to all this work, you want it to arrive pristine. But this works as well. And because it's a 6-inch envelope, there's enough space to fit the card, the fun foam, and the backing to keep it all protected. So I hope that gives you guys some ideas. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, thumbs upping, and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. And make sure to just check out the description box below. I'll have the links to all the supplies used, the link to my blog. So just check that out if you're interested. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.